Welcome to NTD News Today. Here are today's top stories. President Trump will deliver his first State of the Union of his second term tonight, outlining his agenda on the economy, immigration, and national security. Plus, supporters share how they say his policies are already impacting their communities. Trump's new 10% global tariffs take effect today. A lawsuit by Fedex challenging the president's emergency tariffs. Savannah Guthrie says her family is offering a $1 million reward for information leading to the recovery of her missing 84-year-old mother in Arizona. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy marks the 4th anniversary of the war as NATO and EU leaders observe 4 years of fighting in Ukraine.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Today's Tuesday, February 24th. I'm Stephanie Cox. Today's show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie says her family is offering a reward of up to $1 million for the recovery of her 84-year-old mother, Nancy Guthrie, who's been missing since February 1st in Tucson, Arizona.
We still believe in a miracle. We still believe that she can come home. Hope against hope. As my sister says, we are blowing on the embers of hope. We also know that she may be lost. She may already be gone. She may have already gone home to the Lord that she loves.
Nancy Guthrie was reported missing after she did not arrive at her friend's home to watch a live-streamed church service. Authorities say she was last seen the night before after dinner at her daughter's house. The Pima County Sheriff's Office has said investigators believe she may have been taken from her home against her will. Savannah Guthrie urged the public to keep praying. She also announced a $500,000 donation to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The FBI is asking anyone with first-hand knowledge of her whereabouts to contact its tip line. And President Trump's new 10% global tariff takes effect today. The temporary tariff comes after the Supreme Court ruled that Trump's emergency tariffs on trading partners are illegal. Here's more.
The US imposed a new tariff from Tuesday of 10% on all goods not covered by exemptions. That was according to the US Customs and Border Protection. Last week, the US Supreme Court threw out President Donald Trump's tariffs, which it deemed were illegally justified on grounds of an emergency. In reaction, Trump initially announced a new temporary global tariff of 10%, but by Saturday he said he would increase it to 15%. The Financial Times quoted a White House official as saying the increase of up to 15% would come later. The new tariffs took effect at midnight, while collection of the tariffs annulled by the Supreme Court was halted. They had ranged from 10 to as much as 50%. It remains unclear whether and how companies will be refunded for those tariff payments. On Monday, Trump warned countries against backing away from any previously negotiated trade deals with the US, and warning he would hit them with much higher duties under different laws.
Fedex is suing the U.S., seeking a refund on President Trump's emergency tariffs. It's one of the highest-profile moves to recover funds since the Supreme Court last week deemed the tariffs illegal. Fedex is seeking to recover all duties paid as a result of the tariffs, as well as any interest accrued, plus lawyers' fees. The Memphis-based company did not say how much exactly it's seeking. In its lawsuit, Fedex names Customs and Border Protection, the agency's commissioner, Rodney Scott, and the United States of America as defendants. CBP and the White House did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Tensions in the Middle East. Two senior Lebanese officials said today that Israel warned them over the Hezbollah terror group getting involved in any U.S.-Iran war, with Israel reportedly saying it would strike Lebanon hard, targeting civilian infrastructure, including the airport. The State Department is pulling out non-essential government personnel and their eligible family members from the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Iran and the U.S. will hold a third round of nuclear talks on Thursday in Geneva. Ahead of the talks, the world's largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, has docked at the Greek island of Crete. It's part of a major buildup of U.S. forces around the Middle East. President Trump warned Iran yesterday that it faces a very bad day if it doesn't make a deal over its nuclear ambitions. Here's Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt speaking to reporters this morning regarding President Trump's stance on Iran.
President Trump's first option is always diplomacy, but as he has shown, he is willing to use the lethal force of the United States military if necessary.
And Secretary of State Marco Rubio is set to brief top congressional leaders later in the day. The group is known as the Gang of Eight. The lawmakers are expected to receive an update on Iran. On February 19th, Trump said he was giving Tehran 10 to 15 days to reach a deal. We'll be keeping you updated there. The U.S. military seizing an oil tanker in the Indian Ocean after tracking it from Caribbean waters. This, the third sanctioned vessel seized in the region. The Pentagon posted on X today saying the mission took place overnight. It says the vessel was trying to evade sanctions. The ship is linked to Shanghai Legendary Ship Management Company Limited and is under U.S. sanctions. Venezuelan shipping reports show that the ship sailed off in January from Venezuelan waters. It was carrying some 1.9 million barrels of heavy crude oil bound for China. The Pentagon warns, quote, international waters are not a refuge for sanctioned actors. By land, air, or sea, it continues, our forces will find you and deliver justice. Coming up, a State of the Union look ahead. A political science professor brings us insight.
Tuesday, a primetime reveal from the president.
We are going to renew unlimited promise of the American dream.
His vision for the year and success so far. Where will he try to lead Congress, the nation, and the world? Join NTD's Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer to track the president ahead of his speech. Reactions from lawmakers and in-depth panels on what it all means for you. Watch NTD's live special coverage of the State of the Union, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NTD.
Welcome back. White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt this morning outlining what President Trump will discuss at his State of the Union address tonight. Take a listen.
I know the president's really looking forward to his address tonight. You're going to hear a speech that is a celebration of 250 years of our nation and our nation's independence. You're going to hear the president share the stories of everyday Americans who have benefited from his policies. You're going to hear the president share tear-jerking stories of American heroes, past and present, who really exemplify what it means to be a patriotic American. He'll obviously tout the administration's accomplishments over the past year, and he will, of course, lay out a very ambitious agenda, I think, for the working people of this country to make America more affordable and prosperous and safe and make the American dream more attainable. He will call on Democrats in Congress to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. It's despicable that they have shut down this agency that is responsible not just for the deportations of murderers and criminals whom none of you, including Democrat politicians, would want living in your communities, but also FEMA, who is on the ground in the Northeast right now, restoring electricity and power for families who have been impacted by the blizzard.
At least 50 Democrats will boycott President Trump's State of the Union address tonight. This would mark an unprecedented protest against a sitting president. Most of the 50 lawmakers will attend counter-programming events in Washington, D.C. At an event at the National Mall will feature speakers who advocate against Trump's policies. Another event at the National Press Club will feature Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey and media personality John Lemon. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries has called on Democrats who want to protest Trump to avoid heckling during the president's speech. He says they should either attend with silent defiance or not attend at all. A White House spokeswoman responds to the Democrats' planned boycott, saying they, quote, refuse to celebrate and honor the Americans who have benefited from the common sense policies Republicans have governed with. And House Speaker Mike Johnson gives his response to the Democrats' boycott to Trump's State of the Union address. Take a listen.
This evening, the entire country will hear an update on the full scope of President Trump's transformational and historic first year back in office. The results speak for themselves. Why does he have so much to talk about? Because inflation's down, wages are up, investment is booming, the GDP is exceeding every expectation. Democrats, meanwhile, are going to host, count them, 5 separate counter events, rallies of some sort, they call them, in lieu of tonight's address. For all of these theatrics, it doesn't matter how many little gatherings they have or where they stand or how high the volume is on the microphones. They have nothing to offer, nothing but their TDS agenda, the Trump derangement syndrome, and it's on full display.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, as you heard, giving a preview of who the president and First Lady invited as their guests for tonight's address.
The First Lady will have 2 great children with her as part of her Fostering the Future initiative. The president himself has invited some extraordinary guests this year who, again, truly exemplify what it means to be a patriotic American, men and women who have served in our United States military. He'll also be telling the stories of everyday Americans who have directly benefited from his policies. One of them, Megan Hemhauser, who's a waitress from Pennsylvania. She and her husband are directly benefiting from the president's no tax on tips and no tax on overtime policies, which he, of course, signed into law with the help of Republicans last year. She and her family will be taking home more than $5,000 this tax refund season. Another young woman who she and her husband have been struggling with infertility, but she's now saving $3,500 to purchase the drug for infertility to help create a beautiful family.
Nearly everyone in the presidential line of succession will be attending Trump's speech tonight. President Trump has also invited the U.S. men's and women's Olympic hockey teams, who both won gold this year. The men's team quickly agreeing, the women's team rejecting it. Other notable guests are the mother and fiance of Mark Brock, a Louisiana police officer killed in the line of duty. They were invited by House Speaker Mike Johnson. And Claire Lai will be attending. She's the daughter of Jimmy Lai, a Hong Kong pro-democracy and free speech activist. She was invited by Representative Chris Smith. And as we look ahead to tonight's State of the Union address from President Trump, much to unpack. Joining us live now is Aaron Dussault, Associate Professor for Political Science at Indiana University, Indianapolis. Good to have you with us today, Aaron. What's the most important undertaking the president has in his speech tonight?
Really, the biggest and most important thing for President Trump is to outline what he plans, he thinks the country should move over the next year. And I think that this comes at a critical time for him, given that his approval ratings have dropped to, on average, about 40 to 41%. And this is kind of a danger zone for him, because during his first term, the last 3 years, this would be considered maybe the bottom of what his approval rating was. He tended to be higher than this right now. So right now, he's at a critical juncture, I think, in his presidency to see where he's going to go and how the American people are going to respond.
And how much do you think this speech could shift the dial, and especially in regards to the upcoming midterm elections and setting the tone for that?
I mean, it's a big speech, obviously, because it's something that, millions of people watch, and it's covered more than any other speech. But in the end, when it comes to the elections and when it comes to, what Congress actually does, the rubber hits the road in the next couple of months when, Congress actually takes action on the things that President Trump suggests that they do. And ultimately, when it comes to the election in November, most people won't even remember this speech at this point. So it'll be all hinge on what's the state of the economy and how people are feeling about the president at that time.
So what kind of vision do you think will really change and improve the spirit of voters' opinions right now in regards to the president? You mentioned the polls right now, which is pretty normal for this time of year during his presidency. But what do you think he needs to paint there in his vision?
I mean, I still think that he has to focus in on the things that affect the average American the most. And of course, right now, that's still prices, right? He has campaigned in 24 on he was going to lower prices on day one, and they're still working on that. And my understanding is that there will be some new initiatives offered up in this speech in trying to combat, cost of living problems. And I think that this is something that'll hit home, because it's the kitchen table for every single person in this country. Is currently the challenges of just buying groceries every day. And, sure, some tax cuts for, might help a little bit. But in the end, this is, every single day unrelenting higher costs that don't seem to be going anywhere.
And yet President Trump does have arguments pointing to many of the successes in regards to the economy. So what does he need to do to get that message to really come home for people?
I think, so, I mean, like presidents before him, they'll tout the things that look good for him, and so that's not surprising. That's not unique to Donald Trump. But you got to move beyond, say, the most generic numbers, such as the stock market hitting all-time highs. For most of us that are sitting in this country, the stock market hitting all-time highs doesn't have that big an effect. What has an effect is when we go out and buy, our weekly groceries, and it costs, 30 to 40% more than it did a couple of years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Now, about 50 Democrats so far say they're skipping Trump's speech tonight. You heard it just earlier. Is that unusually, historically, and what does it signal about the current political climate?
I mean, that is unusually high. I mean, having that many of the opposition party skip it entirely is not very common. But what it says about this country is really kind of a manifestation of what we've seen, this path we've been on over the last 40 years, which is an increase in polarization. So, and in particular, we see a partisanship that is really hinged on disliking the other party more than it is actually liking your own. And so we see this in numbers and surveys, academic surveys all the time, where we have this massive polarized country when it comes to our feelings, and that polarization is one of the worst kind of polarizations, where it's about negativity. It's that I might not like my party that much, but I really, really dislike the other party, and so I'm kind of stuck here with what I've got.
Now, what do you expect from the Democratic rebuttal at this point within the context of what you just said, and who do you think they need to reach in their goals and their challenges in that?
Ultimately, I think the challenge for, I think it's Governor Spanberger, who's going to be giving this rebuttal speech. I think the challenge is the same as the challenge for Donald Trump. It's to reach us, the average person, sitting at home and facing the same challenges we faced a year ago or 2 years ago. And so we want to see some movement there. And so is a Democrat going to be able to give it to us? Is a Republican be able to get it to us? We don't know, but that's the challenge when we want to be able to see someone who has some type of plan that's actually going to work.
Is there anything that you think might be missing from the broader context here, or the broader discussion on not just the State of the Union speech, but the president's vision for the future and the Democratic Party as they stand right now?
Well, I mean, there is, of course, what most State of the Union spend a lot of time on is foreign policy. And foreign policy right now seems to be a bit disjointed. What I would be looking for, and I think a lot of people who are very interested in this type of area would be looking for, is some type of coherence. So what is our actual goal, going here? Saying America first, that doesn't really provide any detailed information. So outlining exactly what is a coherent foreign policy in relation to NATO, our historic allies, to within the Western Hemisphere and Venezuela. I mean, what is happening here with Venezuelan oil and who's running that country? I mean, so what is it that we're actually trying to do and accomplish? And I think you got to move beyond saying America, make America better, or make America great again.
How does one do that successfully, do you think?
Well, that's a challenge. I expect that this speech is going to be over an hour. And so if you have over an hour to talk to people, you can get into some of the weeds. I think you have enough time to do that. I don't expect it'll happen. But I think, an hour of national television, you can actually talk detail. What is, so if I'm the president, what is my foreign policy goal here with relations to all these different countries and all the things that seem to be happening around the world? I don't think that they're going to do that, but I think that there's a lot of people who would be very interested to see some type of coherent foreign policy outline.
I mean, President Trump has sought to quell a lot of conflicts around the world. Some people are calling him the president of peace. Is that the kind of direction that would succeed for him in terms of uplifting the people and unifying the people?
Well, I mean, peace obviously pulls really well. So if you can, make an argument that you are pursuing peace, I think that that's always a positive. But at some point, it has to move beyond words. We have to see the actions. What is actually happening here? Again, campaigned on that you were going to end the conflict in Ukraine on day one, and so here we are over a year later, and it hasn't happened. So what is actually happening? How, what is it? What are we even doing in Venezuela? I think a lot of people have that question. And so peace is great, but the word is hollow if we don't see actual actions and actual plans being put into place to, achieve those goals.
Certainly the president has a chance to lay those out for us tonight. We'll all be watching closely. Thank you so much for your time today, Aaron Dussault.
Thank you.
And tonight, join NTD's Tiffany Meyer, Steve Lance, and Mario Otsu at 7 p.m. Eastern as we track the president ahead of his speech, hear reactions from lawmakers, and speak with panels on what it all means for you. Don't miss it. And coming up, Ukraine's President Zelenskyy marks the 4th anniversary of the war as NATO and EU leaders observe 4 years of fighting in Ukraine. Welcome back. President Trump tonight delivers his first State of the Union address since reclaiming the White House last year. The speech comes as the nation marks the 250th anniversary of America's founding. We go now live to NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley on Capitol Hill. Jack, what can we expect from the president's address tonight?
Well, President Trump says to expect a lengthy address. And when the president says that, we should take him for his word, as he tends to go off script quite a bit. Now, the State of the Union is where the president is giving a report on the condition of the nation and laying out legislative priorities before Congress. The president's expected to focus heavily on what the White House describes as major accomplishments on the economy and immigration. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt offering a preview earlier this morning. Take a look.
I know the president's really looking forward to his address tonight. You're going to hear a speech that is a celebration of 250 years of our nation and our nation's independence. You're going to hear the president share the stories of everyday Americans who have benefited from his policies. You're going to hear the president share tear-jerking stories of American heroes, past and present, who really exemplify what it means to be a patriotic American.
Now, the president could also address the recent Supreme Court decision that's striking down his tariff authority under an emergency order and outline alternative avenues to keep those tariffs in place. Meanwhile, the government remains in a partial shutdown amid a congressional standoff over funding for Homeland Security, particularly over ICE operations. Press Secretary Leavitt also addressed whether the funding battle over ICE in Homeland Security is affecting other agencies, including FEMA. Take a look.
He will call on Democrats in Congress to reopen the Department of Homeland Security. It's despicable that they have shut down this agency that is responsible not just for the deportations of murderers and criminals whom none of you, including Democrat politicians, would want living in your communities, but also FEMA, who is on the ground in the Northeast right now, restoring electricity and power for families who have been impacted by the blizzard.
Another issue to watch for here tonight is whether the president addresses Iran, and something new about that. The U.S. has deployed its largest aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald R. Ford, to the region, the Mediterranean Sea, as negotiations continue between the U.S. and Iran. The administration is calling on Iran to abandon its nuclear enrichment program, with President Trump warning that failure to reach a deal would have some serious consequences. The president may also renew his push for the SAVE Act, which is legislation that would require proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. A lot to stay tuned for. Back to you.
And Jack, several members of the public spoke before the Republican Study Committee this morning, saying President Trump's policies have benefited them. What did they have to say?
That's right, Steph. Business owners, locally elected sheriffs were among those who addressed the lawmakers, saying that they've seen direct benefits from the president's big, beautiful bill, now law, including the provisions eliminating taxes on tips and overtime pay. Others pointed to sharp declines in crime and overdose deaths since President Trump returned to office. Take a look.
Part of the tax bill that's really helped my employees is no tax on overtime. We do encourage our people to come. These are hardworking, family-oriented people, and to reward them with less taxes on their overtime and their hard work is very beneficial.
Joe Biden's first term, we experienced 74 drug overdoses. In 2025, after President Trump took office, we had 14. So in our county, that was historically low. We're off to 1, possibly 2 this year, so it's continuing to decrease.
Since the Trump administration, it's been a lot easier to be in law enforcement. My narcotics guys, they're not getting as easy busts as they used to. So that means it's working.
We have an all-female staff, lots of single moms, single females just starting out, and I'm hearing amazing stories as a lot of them have already filed their taxes and are not paying in this year, are getting a great return.
Lawmakers from both the House and Senate traditionally attend the State of the Union. However, several Democrats have indicated that they plan to boycott the address, attend alternative programming, or if they do attend, stage a silent protest by withholding applause during the president's remarks altogether. But likely no outbursts like we saw during President Trump's address to a joint session of Congress last year, where Congressman Al Green spoke out and was later ejected for doing so, interrupting the president in the process. So a lot more to look forward to tonight, Steph. We'll keep you posted.
Yep, there's certainly going to be some drama. Thank you so much, Jack Bradley, NTD Washington correspondent. And President Zelenskyy gave an address today marking the 4th anniversary of the start of the Russia-Ukraine war. Zelenskyy says Ukraine has defended its independence since Russia's invasion.
We will do more, because Russia does not stop, unfortunately, and wages war by every method, against peace, against us, against people.
Zelenskyy today said Putin has not achieved his goals, broken the Ukrainian people, or won the war. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers on both sides have died or been wounded in Europe's largest conflict since World War II. Ongoing peace talks with Russia, brokered by the United States, appear to have stalled over the question of territory. Moscow is advancing slowly on the battlefield. It has refused to drop its insistence that Ukraine cede the final 20% of the eastern region of Donetsk. NATO also marked the somber 4-year anniversary. Secretary General Mark Rutte delivering remarks at the NATO headquarters in Brussels today.
Ukraine continues to blunt Russia's aggression, and despite Putin's posturing, Russia has failed to meet their ambitions on the battlefield. Putin must show if he is serious about peace. President Trump has been clear from the start that he wants to end the war now.
European Union leaders joined President Zelenskyy for a prayer service in Kyiv today. The leaders stood alongside priests and military chaplains as prayers were read for Ukraine's soldiers and civilians. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said the trip was to underscore their enduring commitment to Ukraine's fight. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Keir Starmer chaired a video conference with the so-called Coalition of the Willing Leaders. EU buildings were also lit up in support for Ukraine, with flags flown outside key institutions. And for more details on the war's impact on religious freedom in Ukraine, NTD's Chris Bob spoke with Igor Bandura, a leading voice representing Ukrainian churches who's advocating for humanitarian and spiritual support. He also spoke to Sam Brownback, former U.S. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom. Take a look.
We're approaching an important but a horrible milestone in the Ukraine war. We've gone through years of suffering in Ukraine as military escalations continue. Tell me what you're seeing from the front line.
February 24, we would mark tragic anniversary, 4 years of the war Russia started against Ukraine.
And Pastor, for our viewers' context, I know that your Baptist Union is the largest in Europe. Give us a view into the numbers, the amount of congregations, the pastors who are a part of the organization, and how many they serve.
There are 2,300 Baptist churches that belongs to our union in Ukraine. And yes, we are the largest, not only in Ukraine, the largest evangelical community, but the largest evangelical community in Europe. So we lost 110 churches and plus 20 churches for the last year. When front was moving, we lost 20 more churches because people were forced to evacuate, just saving their lives. But at the other territories that are under Ukrainian control, churches became not only local churches for their members, they became like a community center for people. And we were able to plant about 100 new churches across Ukraine. But if you look to the occupied territories where Russia dominates, situation is dramatical because there are many cases when Christians, especially pastors, were targeted, like interrogated, arrested, tortured, even killed.
How real is the concern that Protestantism will cease in the east of Ukraine?
If we think about this theoretically, then my answer for your question, yes. If Ukraine as a country, independent state would disappear, there would be tremendous harm for the gospel ministry, for a real Christian presence, not only in Ukraine, but in the entire region.
Many Ukrainians are hoping that President Trump, Steve Witkoff, others in the administration will be able to broker a peace deal for the Ukrainian and the Russian forces. What is your hope?
Number one for us, we need you, not only because you are probably the only power in the world who can help us to stop this war.
The Chinese Communist Party, they seem to be quite interested in the Ukraine war and have been in talks with Putin in Russia.
As soon as you, as a country, withdraw your presence from the world affairs, the same minute China, Russia, and other authoritarian regime would step in.
I think we should be standing full scale with the Ukrainians. They are carrying our war of freedom, of standing for Western civilization, more than anybody and paying the biggest price of anybody. And we should be backing them with every weapon that we have at our disposal to provide to them at their disposal, because they are the front line of the war. And Ukraine, while certainly not perfect, and you see plenty of problems taking place there, they're providing a lot more religious freedom than the Russians ever dreamed of with this kind of cabal that they've got between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Russian government. You've got this axis of evil that's operational between China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and there's others that join and come and go, but those four, they are stood up against us. There was a big meeting in Beijing last year where Xi Jinping had 20 different countries there standing on the podium with him, and you looked at it and you said, here's the axis of evil. That should send shivers down our spine, and it should be a clear warning to us. They are coming for Western civilization and for the free world. These are communist, authoritarian, totalitarian regimes. They want that type of government in place.
A Ukrainian mother is praying for peace. The 65-year-old has been forced to flee home 3 times and is longing for her 2 sons who went missing during the war. Here's her story.
Helena Popriadukina has had to flee home 3 times in the past 4 years since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In her new neighborhood of Zelenskyy, she and fellow residents hold a moment of silence for fallen troops every day at the so-called Alley of Heroes. The 65-year-old is among the nearly 4 million people displaced within Ukraine. Some 5 million others have fled to Europe.
I never imagined I would have to run from my own home, from the house I built with my own hands.
Control over homeland Donetsk is at the heart of US-backed talks to end the war, now in its 5th year. Russian President Vladimir Putin is demanding Kyiv cede the remaining 20% of its industrialized eastern region that his forces have been unable to conquer. Ukraine is standing its ground against it. With her hometown occupied by Russian troops, authorities allotted Popriedukhina this abandoned house in central Ukraine.
I want our boys to win more than anything. I don't need their little Russia. If I could, I would tear him apart with my own hands. That Putin.
She recalls the first time she fled just as Moscow started the war in February 2022. She only left because her son urged her to. Since then, she has had to flee twice more as Russian troops pressed deeper into eastern Ukraine.
The most difficult move was the last one, this one here. It was the hardest of all. The first move was also tough when we were fleeing. It was very hard for me. We were fleeing under Grad fire. Grad rockets were flying overhead while we dropped to the ground. Once they passed, we stood up and kept going.
She doesn't know what's happened to her 2 sons. One was in hospital in the besieged city of Mariupol when Russian forces swept in. The other enlisted after his own son signed up to fight, then went missing in 2023. More than 70,000 Ukrainian soldiers and civilians remain missing, Kyiv says. That's on top of tens of thousands of troops killed. Popriedukhina is channeling her grief and anger into action, helping to make camouflage nets for Ukraine's troops. Right now, I'm waiting for my son more than anything, even though he's been missing in action for 3 years, she says. I believe he is alive. That keeps me going.
And as the world marks 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, about 60 memorial events are being held across Canada. Thousands gathering to honor the victims of the war between Russia and Ukraine, while calling for an increased international support to bring the conflict to an end. Let's take a look.
Across Canada, memorial rallies honored the victims of the conflict. Political leaders stood in solidarity, praising the courage of Ukrainians and reaffirming support for the nation's sovereignty and territorial integrity.
4 years of war, 4 years of pain, 4 years, it feels like forever. Should never happen. We stand with Ukraine.
Defending the freedom of Ukraine is consistent with our values and our interests, our values of freedom and our interest to defend ourselves against aggressors around the world.
Our support remains unwavering and absolute until every Ukrainian is truly free.
We need to stand united to make sure we win this senseless, terrible war.
On February 24, 2022, Russia launched an unprovoked land, sea, and air assault on Ukraine.
It was my classmate. We were together at school, and he deserved to live his life. He has 2 daughters and a wife, and I think he's supposed to live his life.
4 years ago, every NATO general
because of Russian aggression, he became a soldier. 1 year ago, was killed.
We honor the lives lost, the families torn apart, and the millions forced from their homes. We honor the courage of the Ukrainian.
They gave up a lot to choose freedom and choose democracy, and that's why we must continue to support them militarily and with humanitarian aid.
In Ukraine, people just dying on the war, on their homes because it's super cold now. They just surviving, so I'm very glad that people from different countries here to support Ukraine. I'm very appreciated for that. The most important thing, to know the truth, for Ukraine fighting for.
Canadian officials pledged continued aid, refugee support, and expanded sanctions against Russia. Attendees noted that over the past 4 years, the courage and unity of Ukrainians have been key to resisting a full-scale occupation. They are calling for sustained global support until the war is won.
We are very thankful to Canada for all the support, but we continue calling for continuous military support, humanitarian support. We need financial support as well.
I wish them for no war, and I wish them to live safely and happily. I wish for their freedom.
This is not a fight that takes one country. This is a fight that represents every single civilization in the West that believes in the fundamental rights and principles of Western liberal democracy that we must protect.
NTD News, Canada.
And an update on free speech in Europe. The Trump administration launching a new app that will give users worldwide access to content that has been censored in other countries. This includes not only Europe, but also China and Iran. The platform is called freedom.gov. The State Department says it will go live over the next several weeks. Officials say the project will commemorate the U.S. commitment to freedom of expression as the country approaches its 250th birthday. The legal group Alliance Defending Freedom says if Europe's bureaucrats don't want you to see it, that tells you everything. The First Amendment in the U.S. has provided a legal restraint against government censorship that most other countries lack. Up ahead, parts of the Northeast starting to recover after a historic winter storm, but the road ahead isn't clear yet.
Tuesday, a primetime reveal from the president.
We are going to renew unlimited promise of the American dream.
His vision for the year and success so far. Where will he try to lead Congress, the nation, and the world? Join NTD's Steve Lance and Tiffany Meyer to track the president ahead of his speech. Reactions from lawmakers and in-depth panels on what it all means for you. Watch NTD's live special coverage of the State of the Union, Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NTD.
Welcome back. The Northeast is waking up now to a blanket of snow after a historic winter storm, one that meteorologists say was the strongest in a decade. With the snowfall starting to ease, the region is now looking to get back on track. Here's more.
Parts of the Northeast are beginning to recover today from a historic winter storm. After dumping more than 2 feet of snow across the region, the storm is finally dying down. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani announcing schools in the city will reopen today.
I hope our students enjoy their snow day today and stay warm and safe throughout, but I do have some tough news to share. School will be in person tomorrow. You can still pelt me with snowballs when you see me.
But with feet of snow piled along sidewalks in the city, some school teachers are questioning whether the decision is feasible. In Brooklyn on Monday, residents of an apartment building were forced to evacuate after an underground electrical fire caused by seeping road salt released carbon monoxide. Airlines across the region say they're adding flights today as travel bans start to be lifted. Officials say roads remain dangerous and are urging people to stay off them so emergency crews can get through.
We need to have the ability for all essential vehicle travel to be able to go through, and anybody who doesn't need to be on the road should not be on the roads.
Massachusetts was the hardest hit state in terms of power outages. As of Monday, the National Power Grid said the total number of outages in the state was 272,000. As of this morning, PowerOutage.us says more than 350,000 customers in the Northeast remain without power. And as residents clearing driveways, health experts are warning digging out after a snow and ice storm presents its own hazards.
It's a huge strain on the heart, and lifting that snow, working out in the cold weather, all of that puts a combined strain on the heart. It's spiking our heart rates, it's increasing our blood pressure, and you need to treat it very seriously, especially for people that are otherwise sedentary at baseline.
The National Weather Service is advising people to dress in layers, stay hydrated, and lift small amounts of snow at a time. Unfortunately, though, the winter weather is far from over. The National Weather Service said it is tracking another storm that could bring more snow to the region later this week.
And a police union is calling for arrests after a video emerged of people throwing snowballs at officers in Washington Square Park. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch saying on X the behavior depicted is disgraceful and criminal. She said the matter is being investigated. And a sanitation worker gets an unsettling surprise when he pops the top on a fugitive's hiding spot. Plus, a dog and its owner are back together after a Rocky Mountain adventure gone awry. Let's take a look.
An unsuspecting sanitation worker got quite the scare when they popped the top on a bin, not finding trash, but a person wedged inside who, upon spotting police, quickly bolted and was later arrested. Huber Heights, Ohio police say this trash can caper started when the suspect ran from a traffic stop. Dash cam just happened to catch the moment the worker lifts the lid on the case, frantically pointing police in the direction of a person emerging from the hiding spot. Police posting online saying, as luck would have it, Oscar the Grouch, as we've nicknamed our suspect, appeared at just the right place and the right time. Officers say that suspect was taken into custody and no one was injured. Check out these cows running rampant along a New York interstate. Get it? Traffic had to steer around the byway barnyard as, well, this poor person does their best to contain the utter chaos. Reportedly, a trio of animals liberated themselves from a broken-down trailer. All three were eventually wrangled, according to state police. This happy pair is back together after the dog spent 43 days on the run in the Rocky Mountains. Video posted by Summit Lost Pet Rescue shows the moment they were reunited. The dog, literally named Rocky, got loose from a sitter while his owner Steven was skiing in Keystone, Colorado during a cross-country road trip. Steven enlisted the help of the pet rescue to hunt down his four-legged friend. They spotted Rocky 3 days later but couldn't corral the canine.
They're resilient, they're animals. They're tough, they're resourceful. They'll find food, they'll find water, they'll find shelter.
40 days later, they got a call about Rocky's location and tracked him down. After spending a little time with a vet to get healthy, Rocky and Steven were reunited and got to finish their trip to California.
Bye, Rocky! Safe travels!
And NASA says its historic moon mission faces another delay. It says Artemis 2 won't launch until April at the earliest now. The agency says it detected a helium flow issue and the rocket involved. NASA says it has to roll it off the launch pad for servicing. That follows a test last week the agency had billed as a success. NASA says it has fixed a previous issue involving hydrogen. Artemis 2 will take 4 astronauts on a 10-day mission around the moon, becoming the first time humans will travel into deep space since the Apollo program ended in 1972. That's all we have time for this hour, but if you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at news.today@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Stephanie Cox. Thanks for watching.